So the car's been running pretty great recently, but I've noticed when sitting in traffic and driving the car pretty hard, the engine temperature is getting quite warm. So in this video, I'll be showing you how I'll be improving the cooling system for the car. Before I get underway, let's get you up to speed on what's already been done. Here are some clips showing the state of the cooling system when I first picked up the car back in 2013. The entire system was flushed to remove years of rust, the thermostat was tested, the water pump replaced, and finally the original radiator replaced with an aluminium one from the United States. So to begin with, I'll be replacing the standard factory 7-inch fan with this aftermarket Australian-made Davies Craig 10-inch fan. It's a slimline one, but it still pushes about 3 times the amount of air as the factory standard unit, and also weighs a lot less. So that's good. And from there, I'll be doing a few modifications to the engine bay to reduce the engine bay temperatures. So let's get started. You can see on one side, the mounting holes line up perfectly to the studs on the radiator. But on this side, I'll have to make up some brackets to connect to these mounting holes to these studs. Otherwise, it's a pretty close fit. I don't think you'd fit anything much bigger than a 10-inch fan on this radiator, and there wouldn't be much point because it's overlapping on the top and bottom. So now what I'll do is make up some brackets to join the stud to the mounting holes and get it mounted up properly, and then I'll wire it up and test it out. So everything lines up well, except this little bracket thing here on the fan is contacting the bracket that I've made up. So I'll just trim a little bit off just so it can sit flush with the radiator to get as close as it can to the fins. And then that bracket's complete. I'll use that as a template to then make the second one. So now that the radiator mounts have been made and painted, it's time to set up the fan. So from factory they come in a configuration to be upstream of the radiator. So because we're going to be mounting it behind the radiator, I'm going to have to flip this fan around. Now you can see there's a marking on here that says this side is to face the rear of the vehicle, and there's also a little arrow to point which way the fan will spin. So because it's going to be mounted that way on the radiator, we're going to flip this fan around. So let's give it a test. And that's working perfectly. Now you can see there's a little bit of an issue here. The fan is slightly wider than the gap between the radiator mount and the body of the car, so I'm gonna have to disconnect the radiator to pull this thing out. So now a couple of months have passed and I've been testing the new setup. Everything's been working really well except for the original thermostatic switch isn't activating very reliably. So now I'm going to be adding in a manual switch. So after a bit of time studying the X19 wiring diagram, I thought I'd draw myself up a simple little blueprint of how the whole circuit works, just because in the diagram it's all in Italian and can be a bit confusing. So to start with, a little bit of a lesson on how a relay works. Here's a sample of an old Bosch relay. You can see pin 30, which is this one here, which corresponds to this here. That takes the high current circuit, so from the battery through the fuse box, and then bypasses that to the radiator out of pin 87. But to activate this high current circuit, you need to first switch on a low current circuit. So in this case, it's across pins 86 and 85, 86 and 85. And that is activated by a thermostatic switch on the radiator. So once it hits a certain temperature, that switch will close and complete the circuit, which will then activate the high current circuit to give the radiator fan power. Now, because the thermostatic switch is on the ground side, all I have to do is ground this pin 85 to activate the relay to then activate the fan. So if I just run one from there and then to ground, that will activate the relay, but also leave the original circuit intact so it can turn on and off when it needs to.
Get to making with jive, boy, shine. When it hits you, yes, indeed, yes, yes, you shine. When it hits you, yes, indeed, yes, yes. When it hits you, yes, indeed, yes, 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 you shine. When it hits you, yes.